Okay, I had to use a new version of that theme song because the copyright police were after me. So if you
Really?
watched the previous episode with Jeff Greenfield, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mike the New Haven podcast. You notice the theme is a little bit different. So since I don't want to get a copyright strike, I changed it. So welcome to another episode of the Mike the New Haven podcast. I am happy to be live on both YouTube and LinkedIn, courtesy of StreamYard, of course. Like I said, Jeff Greenfield was a previous guest. And so we shift from his career in the news industry and his experiences of being a speechwriter for Robert F. Kennedy as well as John Lindsay into volume 8 of the best of the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, my mini-series focusing on the men and women of the New York City Fire Department. Volume 1 was Ray Seeley. Volume 2 was Dennis Smith, author of Report from Engine Company 82. 3 and 4, Hank Millay, Squad 288, Rescue 1. 5 was Paul Hassagen, Rescue 1. 6 was Captain Dennis Tardio of Engine 7. Ladder 1, 7, Tim Brown, Rescue 3. And today, my next guest for Volume 8, who enjoyed a combined 24 years in civil service in the city of New York, 21 of those years on the FDNY, but originally with the NYPD from 1991 to 1994. He did the rollover, which we'll discuss as we go along. So over the next 21 years, he'd become a key manager in risk assessment, helping the department with preparedness, coordination, and rescue operations. He was a Rescue 5 guy for a while, eventually becoming a lieutenant in the process. Retiring in 2015, he remains an active figure in rescue coordination, currently serving as the chief executive officer at CIMS Solutions, Inc. He is Peter Blaich, and he joins me for Volume 8 of the best of the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite on the Mike the New Haven podcast. Peter, welcome. How are you?
Hey, Mike, thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Thank you for being here. So first question is always a simple one. Take me through your early years. Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Brooklyn and then later in Staten Island.
Okay.
So,
Brooklyn and Staten Island.
yeah, did the transition over the Verrazano, as they say. But yeah, both really good places to grow up at the time. Brooklyn as a kid was Flatbush, and Flatbush was a very diverse neighborhood, great people, all different backgrounds, all different cultures. I always say I was kind of a Flatbush kid at heart. And then made my way over to Staten Island and finished up middle school and high school there. And yeah, went on for a career in civil service. So yeah, had good, great parents, great upbringing, surrounded by a lot of police, fire, sanitation, bus drivers. As you know, both Brooklyn and Staten Island are civil service heavy with a lot of great people. So there was a lot of great influences in my life being in public service, that's for sure.
You're a fourth generation New York City firefighter. So, was it always predetermined, or not predetermined, that's not the word I'm looking for, but a destiny, for lack of a better way to put it, for you to be a fireman?
It was fought over a holiday dinner because half my family, so my mother's side was all police officers. God rest her soul, she's not around anymore, but she was just as much as my dad was a driving force in my life. So was my mother. She just could make all those police fire conflicts go away. I said if she became the mayor, we never would have had a battle of the badges, because she did many holiday dinner with police and firefighters on opposite sides of the table. And big Irish, German, Italian family, so you can imagine there was a couple of beers involved. And but I had my grandfather on my grandfather, my mom's dad, he retired as a sergeant from the NYPD. I mean, he was there pre-World War II and all that. So I mean, I still remember going in a patrol car, squad car, they called it back then. And he had he had the black leather jacket. It was different uniforms back then, for NYPD. And I think he had it predetermined that I was going to go on the police department. And then my grandfather on my dad's side was chief in the fire department, battalion chief. So, he's like, you're not going on this job, you're going on this job. But either way, it was always stressed to me to, you're not going to get rich in civil service, but you're not going to be poor either. So it'll afford you the ability to have a good family life and a middle class income. So, and everybody around me growing up was police, fire, EMS, sanitation, bus driver, school teacher. Everybody was very civil service orientated in the neighborhoods that I grew up in. And I really saw on both sides of the fence what the camaraderie was. When my grandfather on my mother's side, my mother's dad, I should say, grandfather on my mother's side, when he passed, he was actually working, had a heart attack on the job, NYPD, and actually, I just remember seeing an outpouring of all, the men and women in blue, surrounding the family. And then obviously then going on with, loss that happened on the fire department, I saw the brotherhood on that side too. So two uniquely different jobs to a degree, but I would say the camaraderie and the brotherhood, sisterhood to a degree exists on both of them. So I was happy to get on the NYPD. I was happy to go to the FDNY. I feel like a good base of my career was what I learned on NYPD, because there are similarities, how to deal with people, issues. And as a young person, like I got on the job like very young. So I was turning 20 when I got on NYPD, which was like the lowest, or I should say the youngest age you could get on at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And they would grab you because if you weren't 21, they wanted you to buy beer. And I remember getting asked out of the academy a couple of times, and they're like, "Hey, we need to take that guy. He's got to go, go buy us some beer and stuff." And I'd be like, "Well, this is a great job. I got on here and they were asking me to buy beer, but they wanted me to go as a 20-year-old and buy beer because, legal drinking age was 21. And then I'd go there, buy a beer, come out, and, everybody would run in and, raid the place, let's say." But I learned too that they were, I don't want to say targeting, but they weren't going after, a mom and pop store for selling a beer. They were going after everything because they were selling drugs out of the back of the store, or, that was when that era on the police department was a lot of, enforcement. And they really, I feel like when I was there, we really went after the bad guys. Of course, now going forward, things have changed in that game a lot. And I still think one of the things that I realized going on is I think they still don't know what they want from the New York City Police Department. I think as a nation, we don't really know what we want from police officers in general. We want them to solve every problem. We don't want them to be heavy-handed. But at the same time, everybody's human. And if you do want to get bad people off the streets, because like when I grew up, both in Brooklyn and Staten Island, you had good people on one side of the street and you had bad people on the other side of the street. And it was really your family network, good peer support with friends that kept you from going to the, say, bad side of the corner, because you saw it as a kid growing up in inner city, New York. You saw, the drug dealers and all that, fast money, fast cash, girls in cars, and civil service workers were going out there and working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And that was kind of, for me, that was the early 90s. It was a lot of, you could see what was good and bad right in front of you, especially living in the city. And, I always say good people want police officers, good people want firefighters, good people want EMT, bad guys don't. So, in time when we're not, and
experiencing some technical difficulties here in the Mike to Haven podcast. This is volume 8 of the Best of the Bravest with Peter Blaich. While Peter figures out the connections issues there, I'll shout out to the live chat, of course. We have Alicia B, Boxing MMA 365, Raquel Pranzo, appreciate you being here. Angela Ang is here, as is, of course, Joey Brooklyn, and The Truth, who's a new subscriber to a channel of mine. So I appreciate, you guys being here. Peter's coming back in now. Hopefully we have the tech issues resolved. Peter, you got me? There you go. You're back. A little bit of some difficulty there. Yeah, come back out and come back in, if anything. It's okay. If you have to. Although you seem fine now. There you go.
I'm not able to hear you, Mike. I'm trying to figure it out here.
No worries. I'll keep shouting out to the live chat. allegedly guilty is here, and that's Joe Murray, of course, who has a new show of his own. And you should check it out. He has over 1,000 subscribers already. He's beating me. I'm trying to get to 500. I'm at 492. Of course, thank you, The Truth. I appreciate that comment. Peter, if you can hear me, what I would suggest, and I will shoot you a text, you can exit the stream and then come back in, if anything. So we will wait for Peter. And like I said, this is volume 8 of the Best of the Bravest. And I appreciate all you being here. This is the perils of live podcasting. If I wasn't live, and if I was on Zoom, not that I'm complaining, I'm just telling you how it is. You can edit this part out so that it flows rather easily, but I wanted more interaction. And so there are pros and cons to that. So we will deal with those as best we can. I will tell you, by the way, as we wait for Peter to return, that we have 2 other shows coming this week, and that is Tales from the Boom Room, Profiles of the NYPD's Bomb Squad with Richie Teamsman tomorrow. That's tomorrow at 6 o'clock p.m., Tuesday, November 30th. And then Thursday, December 2nd with Volume 17. That will be Paul Yurko. The Truth, yes, I am. I am scheduling. I am scheduling. He says, I see you're already scheduling shows in January 2022. You're a busy guy. I am. You got to hustle. You got to hustle. I'm sure Joe Murray knows, and he's in the chat. So, we have to stay as active as we can because you don't get anywhere otherwise. So show business is a tricky business. And we navigate it as best we can. Sorry, I'm just texting Mr. Blaich here, a little inside baseball regarding this situation here. But we will deal with that as best we can. So we have a few guests booked. I will say the last definitive show of the year will be December 17th, and that will be with ABC News' Diane Macedo. That was a pre-recorded interview from September that I did with her. And she has a new book out. That's why I couldn't put it out right away. So I'm going to wait until her book's out December 14th. So you'll get that December 17th. That'll be the definitive last show of the year. And then you will get the best of the Mike to New Haven podcast. I'm working on a best of. And Joey Brooklyn, yes, consistency is key to YouTube. I will remember that, Joey. And you do a great job in your own right. I watch your streams. You did a great stream the other night. So I am very much looking forward to seeing more from that. I see allegedly guilty in there. Like I said earlier, I'm looking forward to seeing more from you, Joe, as I'm sure you will continue to get, I should say, great guest, and have many, many great conversations with them. Your show with Irma was great. And of course, I'm curious to see who is next in the pipeline as we wait for Mr. Blaich to re-enter here. And he says, thank you, of course, and happy to support. So for those of you watching on LinkedIn, if you're just tuning in, and on YouTube, just tuning in, this is volume 8 of the Best, the Bravest interviews with the FDNY Elite. We're having some technical problems right now, but our guest is Peter Blaich, who did 24 years in total of civil service to New York City, NYPD, 91 to 94. He's back. He's coming back. So hopefully
Sorry about
that.
I don't know what happened.
No, it's all right. I
thought maybe I said the wrong thing and you got rid of me.
No, I was holding serve. In the meantime, I was just saying we were dealing with some technical difficulties. That's the perils of live podcasting. But nonetheless, we persist. So we left off talking about what good people want, and I'll let you resume.
Yeah. So when I was in the police academy, can you hear me good now?
Yes.
Okay. So when I was in the police academy, we had these instructors, and they were like, trying to like figure out what command and everything you were going to go to on the NYPD. And I remember wanting to know like what was the busiest, precincts at the time to go to. And my instructor said to me, he goes, what are you crazy? Like, I know you got some hooks on the job. You want to go to like, Staten Island, Queens, someplace like that where it's, not so crazy. I said, no, I want to go to Brooklyn. I want to go to like the 7-5, the 7-1, the 7-0, the 6-7. And he just looked at me, I'll never forget. And he's like, you must be nuts. Like, I'm not sure if we're going to let you out of here, And, but that was the mentality I had. And it transferred over to the fire department because I wanted to go to busy places, with the fire department as well, because I wanted to learn my trade. When I went over to NYPD, I went over there 100%, and I wanted to learn the job and become a good police officer. And I felt the only way to do that was really go to a busy command. And I was lucky to go there because when I went there, you had like, I worked with all stars. I always say it was not me it was the people that brought me up on both jobs. And on the NYPD side, I worked with really, even though I was there for a short time, if you look at a whole career, I worked with really super all-star people. From the commanding officer I went to, really gave you the tools and the training that you needed to become a good police officer. Kevin McGinn, who him and his brother were there at the same time, and me and Kevin still very, very close friends. He went on to be a chief and retire from NYPD as a police chief. And I worked with Kevin's brother in Squad 18 on the fire department side, taking details there and stuff. And I went to SOC, and Kevin's brother was killed on 9/11.
Peter.
And just people like that. Patty Brennan was the CO at the time. He was an icon on the police department. You could not find more of a gentleman to work with, to have as a commanding officer than Patty Brennan. And I worked with my training officer there was Lieutenant Federico Navarez, and he went on and he was a training officer there, and he took a personal interest in you, training you and making sure you were a good police officer. And of course, we know that he went on and he got killed in the 7-0 in the line of duty. He was shot during a domestic, responded to the scene, and the perpetrator, shot him in the head and killed him. And I still stay in contact, with the family. His daughter's on the police department now. She's a detective in K9. And I look back at my career. I consider it all one career. And I look at it and I go, how fortunate I was to work with such great, truly dedicated people that, with the exception of me maybe talking about them, probably nobody even knows their names, And I always look at them, and I look at that time period, early to mid 90s it was busy in the city still. The city was still suffering from, crack. It didn't recover from the 70s and the 80s. And parts of the city was still very, very busy for police and fire. So, I had a good start to a city run. And I now I sit back and I go, not only was I fortunate to work with these people, but I was fortunate to be able to retire for the most part healthy, when a lot of the people that I worked with here and that was obviously I know more on the fire side because I was there longer, and I still think about to just be alive today and be healthy, because all police officers and firefighters don't retire with health, and they don't retire of their own means. They're usually forced out, or you hear about them 2 years after they retired and they died. So I feel blessed for that reason.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting. Paul Hassigan brought this up when he was on the show, in that when he was referring to special operations within the NYPD and the FDNY, and he was referring to rescue units versus the SU. But his point was, anybody who's in special operations within the fire department or the police department is relatively the same person, in that they want to get the job done. To what you said earlier, that is very much the truth. They want to go out there and be proactive. And it sets a good template, because there's someone in the chat here I was referencing while you were away with the technical difficulties, and that's Joe Murray, who had 15 years in the NYPD. He's now a criminal defense attorney. We all wanted to go to busy houses, he says. We wanted to learn the job, and you did. You don't learn it when you're on a rinky-dink neighborhood in Manhattan, where the biggest thing that happens is somebody's cat got loose and, they can't find them. You learn it by working in Brooklyn. Bob Gallione from Rescue 2 talked about it, not on this show, but in the infamous documentary profiling Rescue 1 and Rescue 2 Still Riding. You want to learn how to be a fireman, as an example, work in Brooklyn, because there's so many fires there. So that rollover, trading in the gun and the squad car for the rig, in 94. A lot of guys do it. They go from either FDNY to NYPD and NYPD to FDNY. And before I get to the question, I want to explain for those who may not be familiar with the concept. If you test, let's say in New York City, you want to be a cop, as an example, and the fire department calls you first, you can go and join the fire department and serve with the FDNY for a while. And if you still want to be a cop and the NYPD calls you, you can roll over to them, or vice versa. And when you retire, since it's the city agencies, it will count towards your pension. It's all collective city time. They don't count it separately. So for you in 94, that rollover, and when you went to the FDNY, How long did it take you to adjust from not so much chasing bad guys, but now having to be a different kind of first responder?
So, yeah, it's different as far as, so the best way to explain, police lower fired, you can't do the right, because you have to see who's watching you. It's still in process. You know, are you gonna have to draw your gun? That kind of stuff. So PD teaches you, in my opinion, it was lower, but you know, precision type of far as you don't know first get in there, right? Say that out, and that takes do that. Set firearm. You throw in your gear on out the door, and you go get to the location. And
Peter, if you could hear me, you're cutting in and out. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Once again, let's see. I will do just that, Joe. I'll try to work it here, but I will text them again in momentarily to try and mitigate this problem that we're having. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. We are having some issues once again, but like I said, we will work through them and figure out a way to get a better connection, because Peter does have an interesting story. And I do want to chronicle it. His experiences in 24 years are definitely one to be noted, as he talked about with his NYPD years. And I don't know. Well, Angela Angs has finished the interview over the phone. I don't want to do that. I think you can still get him on video. And I will text him as such momentarily here. Is basically something along the lines of asking is his connection good? But I will roll with the punches, as I always do. And if he can get to a spot where his connection's a little better, then that would help. So I will text him that right now. If he can get if you, I should say, can get to a spot where the connection's good, it might work. But in the meantime, until he comes back, feel free to hit me with some questions. I will answer them as best as I can. And we can make it work. I will finish the text. All right. I'm so interested in this because I was in his shoes, about to take the FDNY physical exam when I was in Midtown North, but ultimately stayed on the NYPD. Yes, I do recall that. I do recall you telling me that, Joe Murray, when you were on the show a few months back. For those of you who are newer, come check out my interviews with Joe Murray. It was 2-part special, part 1 and part 2. Peter's back. Hopefully we can work through these tech issues that we're having. And we can get to hear you better. I'm sorry. It's just you were given what I'm sure was a great answer, but you were cutting in and out. I can't quite hear you, but you're here. And you're muted. LOL says the truth. I know, we're working through it. Are you Peter? Are you on your phone? Can't see him. Can't hear him either. Yeah, this is a little bit of a tricky juxtaposition here. No, I still can't hear you. Still can't hear you, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, bear with me, folks, while he works this out. But he'll come back in a moment. I'll figure it out. And yeah, there's no sound. Is he using Wi-Fi or the data on his phone? Let's see. I don't know. Your mic isn't connected, it says. Should be connected now, hopefully. Apologies once again, ladies and gentlemen. We will figure this out. And I think allow me to give Peter a call real quick, and I'll keep the microphone on. I'm laughing because everyone I ask about Billy and police off the cuff, he comes back. Well, I'll answer your question in a moment, the truth. All right. Is Peter back? Let's see. All right, you should be back now. Can you hear me? No, I cannot hear you. If you're on Wi-Fi, it might help mitigate this problem that we are having. Exit and re-enter. Nope. Just try leaving and coming back in. And that'll probably help solve that problem. The truth. What did you want to know about Billy? Oh, how did I meet Billy? Well, I was a fan. I was a fan of Police Off the Cuff. I was originally a fan, like many of you, and I watched the show, and I just invited Bill via LinkedIn to come on the show. He loved my interview with him. He was enjoying it immensely. And afterwards, that's how I got pretty much on his radar. Not too long after that, I interviewed Mark DeMeo, and we were able to hit it off as well. Mark and I did what I thought was a really good interview. And then not too long after that, the opportunity came about to work with Bill. So that's how that came to be. And that was a very, very good thing, because now I'm working. It's my first job. I like it a lot. And, hopefully there's more in store. I'm trying to book guests. I'm trying to make some calls and send emails. And it's a job that keeps me busy, but I like being busy. I hate being still, basically. I don't want to sit around and just play my PS4 all day. No, I'm not a new recruit. I've never been on the job. I don't plan to go on the job. I don't have the heart to go on the job. But I like chronicling the work that these individuals do. And, Peter's certainly no different. Thank you, Angela. Mark and I try our best with after hours. So hopefully now I'm seeing Peter re-enter. And hopefully I have him. I can hear you now. And that's good. So hopefully we don't have
this
any.
one works.
Yeah, well, no, it's all right. It's all right. Don't worry about it. So we talked about the rollover, and my question to you originally was, and I apologize for making you repeat the answer, but just so the listeners have the benefit of hearing it. The adjustment period, was it difficult at all, given the fact that you are now shifting from, granted, you're still a first responder, yes, but you are now shifting from one form of emergency response to another?
Yeah. So, the best way I can sum that up is like NYPD teaches you, even in aggressive units, they teach you time distance shielding is your best defense, right? So when you go into a situation, a robbery or something like that, you don't know what's going on. The best thing to do is take a slow approach and try to let it absorb and kind of figure out, who's the good actors, who's the bad actors, that kind of thing. And the difference for me was going to fire, where the alarm goes off and everybody's going out the door, and then first do a couple of calls and it's jump on, and fire escapes are hot.
You know what, Angela? I think I am going to take you up on your suggestion to interview him over the phone. This is not going as I had envisioned, but nonetheless, I will stick with it. I apologize. I will now call Mr. Blaich and attempt to just maybe conduct the interview in that form, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Momentarily, I'll be back. Raquel Branzo, hello, once again. So, let's see what we have here. 8 people in the chat. I wish our technical problems weren't so persistent, but they are what they are. Well, so we will mitigate this problem as best as we can. No worries, says Joey Brooklyn, I should say. Well, I appreciate that, but obviously the goal is to put on a good show. And it will be true. That's very nice of you. You handle stress well. That comes from experience, Mrs. Pranzo. That comes from experience. There are a lot of tense situations. Well, I tell you, if you grow up in a household as I did, where you're around a bunch of women all the time, you learn how to handle stressful situations with aplomb. So that is that. But yeah, well, if note to future guests, if you're going to use StreamYard, make sure you're in a good place as far as connection is concerned, and don't use your phone. Use a laptop. I'll have to ask him to do that if he's not doing that already. So let's see what happens with that. Easy and steady makes you a better person. No offense, but listen, I had my older sister. I had my mother too, so that's gonna keep you on your toes, and that is not going to rattle you as you go along, because it builds character. I have to be careful what I say here, because you never know who's listening, and I don't want to get in any trouble with that. But nonetheless, I know my sister's watching. I love you. I do not mean any harm with that statement. Peter Blaich is the guest of honor tonight. This is the Best of the Bravest, Volume 8. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. We'll work through the problems. We'll get him back. Hopefully he can use a laptop, because I think he's on his phone. You never want to use StreamYard on your phone, because it just doesn't function well in many, many instances. So you want to use a laptop instead. Alicia B says, LOL. Well, it's true. It's true. Somebody joked with me a while ago. He's like, one day you'll be an awesome husband or boyfriend. I says, who said, to which my response to that, who says I'm getting married? Do you think I want to do that at this stage of my life after what I've been through? I need some time off to recover. Maybe one day, but it'll be a long time. I want to have some form of bachelor years, but then people tell me, you'll see a girl that'll just knock you out of your socks, and then, you're smitten and it's too late. So hopefully I can avoid that pitfall, but they're out there. They're out there. Angela Ang says, Mike, your sister is your best friend for life. Yeah, that's true. That is true. I would tend to agree. Alicia B, Mike, you are funny. Well, you're giving me too much credit, but I thank you. Pete would say, stay single, says Miss Branch. I tend to agree with the lieutenant. Yeah, the bachelor years are the best years, because, well, there's no issues pertaining to that, because, you can come and go as you please. But, I prefer to wait. I want to enjoy those years of solitude. But if Mrs. Wright comes along, treat her nice, of course, and saddle up. I can't picture that though. But hey, there are people who in my life who couldn't picture it either, but they have bows of their own, so you never know. I appreciate all of you being here. Again, I apologize. I'm waiting for Peter to probably use a laptop. But when he gets back, we'll get right back into that question again. You notice my facial expression when this problem was happening, because I knew he was giving a good answer, but I heard him fading out, just like, because it's a good answer, and it's a good topic to cover. Think about it. You're in the NYPD, where the enforcement is much different, or the response, I should say, is much different. You're going out there and you're handling criminal matters. Now, is there an aspect of criminal investigations in the FDNY? Yeah, you have the fire marshals that do all the arson investigations and things pertaining to that front. But generally, it's not a law enforcement agency, but it is in a response agency, and it's part of the big two. You have the NYPD and you have the FDNY, and there's, certain sub-departments within that. There's many different police departments in the city, many different law enforcement agencies, but there's only one FDNY. So whatever emergency involving any kind of rescue, you're going, in addition to all the fires they fight throughout the years. And even now, when they're not as busy as they were during, let's say, the 60s and the 70s with the war years, EMS, Joey Brooklyn mentions, yes, that's true, Joey, they're still very, very busy. And imagine the last year with the pandemic and having to go out there and fight a fire and having to go out there and treat people who are sick. And Alicia B, I think you hit the nail on the head. She says, from an outsider's perspective, and I'm an outsider too, both dangerous, only in different ways. Yeah. And that goes for any city, but especially the big ones where there's a high volume of calls. Because think about not just New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston, Dallas, Houston. You have your hands Very, very full. It's not a walk. Even here in New Haven. New Haven is not the size of those aforementioned cities, but New Haven has a fair volume of calls for both departments that keeps you quite busy. And Joey Brooklyn says, and this is true, the fire department comes faster than an actual ambulance in a medical emergency. It's amazing that the response times are what they are in the city, which is pretty good, given the fact that you don't have to be a traffic expert. All you have to do is just go to the city once, even if you don't live there. And the traffic they deal with to try to get to these calls. I remember John Lampkin telling me this. John Lampkin, retired NYPD sergeant with emergency service, even with the big ESU rescue trucks that they have to drive, which is, it has the air horn, has everything, they still wouldn't get out of your way. They still would not get out of your way. So I can only imagine, what it's like. You have to really, though, if you can drive a rescue vehicle through the streets of New York City, you can do anything. You can do anything. Alicia B says, as a finance person, my biggest risk was a paper cut. It's very funny. It's very funny. And maybe crunching the wrong numbers, too. You never know. That's a job that I don't wish on anybody because I hate math. I do not like working with numbers. Let the record reflect that. And I apologize. I will cease to be boring momentarily. Hopefully, Peter can come back and connect and get back on here, and I can continue my conversation with him. For those of you that have listened to the audio version of this conversation, I will edit these parts out. I'll do my best to at the very minimum so that you don't have to deal with the awkward pauses if you listen to the audio front. But on the video front, it is what it is. Let's see here. We have somebody who is trying to troll, and we are not going to deal with that person. So that's fine. That is fine. We're not going to have that person commenting because I don't know why they're here, but they're looking to cause a problem, and we're not going to have that. Anyway, in the meantime, until Peter, I don't have mods yet. I need mods. Can I appoint mods? I should. Joe Murray is asking that question. I don't know how to do that though. On StreamYard, at least. I'll figure out a way. So I blocked him. I don't have to worry about Joey. But until Peter gets back, hit me with some more questions. I don't want to just be rambling here. I'll answer some questions that you may have about the show, about me. Yeah. So that was interesting. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Click on a name on YouTube. Well, I can probably do that. I'll do that in a moment, Angela. I'm just got a text here from Peter Blaich. There shouldn't be one. We love the show. Thank you, Joe. What's next for me? Well, it's interesting, Joe, because it's funny you ask that. As he says, what's next for you? Well, as I said earlier, there's the shows coming up with the Bomb Squad guys, and then there's the pre-recorded interview with Diane Macedo from September. And of course, you go from that to the best of. I'm working on some guests for the next year, but the thing is, it's tough chasing certain people because certain people can be very, very flighty. Certain people can be very flighty, and that they don't get back to you right away. And I'm not going to say any names, but there's a couple of interviews right now that I'm trying to book that are just really frustrating for me because the person these people are not getting back to me. So I keep persisting. Nevertheless, you persist. Angela, I will make you a moderator right now. And if you can, please subscribe to MC's Audio. The shows aren't like this all of the time. But we are having the problems that we're having, and we're working out as best we can. So, Angela, let me make you a moderator. If I can, add moderator. There we go. Joey, you are a moderator. Joe Murray, you are a moderator. So, congratulations, you've been deputized. So, yeah, there you go. And if we have anybody else like that, well, my sister's here. Well, Judge, I'm having technical difficulties. I'm waiting for the gentleman to get back. Hey, Mike made it back from dinner just in time. I hope you had a good dinner. And I hope you got me leftovers too. So, and if you didn't, then, next time I see you, we're going to have a problem. But welcome to my dear sister who is here tonight. And I keep telling her to get on YouTube. I'm telling her to make a YouTube channel, you know, to do her fashion stuff and whatnot. And she won't. She's like, I don't know how to do it. I'm on here. I'm riffing as best I can. It's my honor, says Joe Murray. Well, thank you. It's my honor to have bestowed upon you the honor of being a moderator. Peter Blaich, like I said, is the guest, the best of the bravest. Volume 8. We're 40 minutes into this now. And I've done most of the talking, and we haven't even scratched the surface of the man's career, because we only had the chance to speak about his NYPD years. I want to get into his FDNY years, but I can't quite seem to get him to have a good connection. But we'll figure it out, and we'll do it as best we can. Joe Murray says, please take a second to give this video a thumbs up, please. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish Peter was here, because normally it would be, you know, the guest doing most of the talking. This is the most I think I've talked in an episode in quite a while. Mainly because I don't like to. The sign of any good interviewer is to just let them talk. But I guess this has gone from the best of the bravest to Mike Colón live. I feel like Larry King. I really do. Minus he had a better suit than this. This is not exactly my best attire. Peter's back. Let's try this again. Hopefully this works. I can see him. Well, I can't. Well, I can see his. There he goes. Is he in? Is he in?
I think
he's back.
Yeah, I have no idea why he keeps doing that. But
are you on a laptop or on a phone?
So I was on the laptop, and the laptop wasn't working, so now I went to the phone.
Well, the phone. You look clearer. You sound better.
So we'll try that.
we'll try it again. But I was able to riff, and then I have the chat here that's kept me occupied in the meantime. So I hate the third time is hopefully going to be the charm. The original question was, of course, transitioning from NYPD type of emergency response to FDNY. Hopefully now the answer can be clear, and I'll give you the floor.
So with transferring over, you mean from police to fire?
Yeah.
So it was just two different methods of responding, let's say. Whereas again, police was they trained you more to take a look, see what's going on before you kind of run in, approach. And not that the fire department was different from that, but the fire department prided itself on a lot of pre-planning and running into buildings, and we could just respond we could respond differently than the police has to respond. And you kind of picked up you picked up from transitioning from one job to the other. You kind of picked that up, but then again, transitioning into EMS and everything, where you're now going to medical calls, maybe person stabbed, robbed, that kind of thing. There's a lot of that police background that helped me and came over with me and transferred over to the fire department, because it definitely showed you how to make a different approach to those situations. You know, when you pull up and there's a fire and people are showing at windows and in fire escapes and stuff like that, you're focusing on how to get to the building, how am I attacking the building, what position you have on the truck and the engine, and how you're moving into the building. And you can just absorb that in a way and make that decision when, you know, like I always said, seeing fire was always a good thing. When you didn't see fire and you had to go hunting for it, that's when we usually have bad problems or a bad day on the fire department. So that wasn't always the case on the police department. You had to do more of figuring out, because, you know, someone would call you, but they turn out to be maybe the bad player in that situation. So, yeah, it's different types of approaches to response, but both transitioned over with me and carried into a career that I felt very fortunate enough to have that background.
So from 1994 to 2001, you were in ladder 123. Now, granted, we're not in the war years of the 60s and 70s. While you were gone, I was talking about the volume of calls that the FDNY, both as the fire service and, of course, EMS Bureau, still get even now, especially within the last year with the pandemic. But nonetheless, it's a busy time. And a ladder company is pivotal, because you guys are the ones that are doing roof operations. You guys are the ones that are scaling, trying to figure out what the climate is on top and telling the men on the bottom in some cases. I'm sure you found yourself on the roof plenty of time at a fire. How many runs was it common to get a shift while with Ladder 123?
Well, when I went to 123, and just to put in perspective, I always say I never worked through the war years, but I was fortunate enough to learn from the people that went through the war years. So the fear on the job now, I feel, from what I talk to from other retirees and just people that are active duty, is when I was on, you still had a lot of those war year guys were around. So, I mean, every time you got on the fire truck, every time you got on the rig, the truck, especially in 123, you had all these senior guys, 20 plus years, and they were all telling you, okay, we're going to a brownstone. This is what you're going to do if you have this position. And of course, you ride with the officer for a long time as a can man until, the officer feels comfortable enough that he can give you another assignment. And then you kind of make your way up to, for us, it was the can and the irons. And once you got that down in 123, they would push you to the outside, let's say. And they would put you on the roof before they put you on the OV, because you would work with the chauffeur regularly. So the chauffeur knew if he had a new person on the roof that, okay, I'm going to give some extra attention to that, help them out, that kind of thing. The OV was opposite the fire, and I think it's still one of the most dangerous positions, in a truck company. And it's a skill that you have to learn over time. And I was fortunate enough, my dad was a lieutenant way back in the war years, Dad got appointed in 68 and went to 277. Then he went to Vietnam. When he came back from Vietnam, 277 went from a camp, not a lot of runs, to when Bushwick was burning down. So he learned all his skill from 277. And then when he got promoted, he took that over to 123. And you still had a lot of those guys that worked with my dad around. And those guys, that was a college education that you got when you went to 123. You had rebuilding in the city was there. You had housing projects. You had high-rise residential. The only thing you didn't have there was high-rise Class E or high-rise commercials. You didn't have any high-rise commercials, but you had everything else you could think of. Private dwellings, not a lot, but we had a few. Brownstones, row frames, high-rise residential, you name it was there. Limestone as opposed to brownstone. I remember I got hooked up on that. And one of the old timers was like, hey, don't get hooked up on the color of the building. If brownstone is a limestone, it's just different brick. But, you're talking a caliber of a firefighter there who came up through the war years, and they were teaching a whole generation of what it was like to handle fires. It was as to this day, the top three are OS down, structural work. And that was always the thing when you were in the academy. The Bronx was still having fires, Harlem was still having fires, you had parts of Brooklyn still having fires, and everybody would tell you in the fire academy, you want to go to a place where they have a high number of occupied structural work, because vacant building fun for a while, and they old firefighters get hurt in buildings. And it's good to go where there's a life hazard, because I felt like you're doing the most good by saving the people, right? Not, you want to save buildings and save property, but we're really in the business of saving lives, right? So, occupied structure is still there. I mean, it was not uncommon to have, we would call a couple of jobs a tour there still. And I mean, and that was nothing compared to what the guys had in the 70s and the 80s there. I mean, so I was very happy with the work when I first got to 123, and I learned from not only great people, but they were great dads, were great at fixing anything. As a young person in the house, and you worked with people that could take a kitchen sink apart, fix a laundry, because these guys didn't rely on that, because they all came up from the 70s and the 80s when the city didn't have money to buy a new washing machine. He's all that. Follow around, and you work with your in different ways. the education I got there to me, that was, I don't know. I hope it's still the same place, but you just don't know. I mean, because once you start losing that seniority base with those guys and all that time, the job's going to suffer. But the fire department does have a great way of reinventing itself, and the New York City Fire Department's been around for a long, long time. So, you know, the biggest thing for the guys back then was taking over the role of EMS, and now I would say the guys are good at it. But you know, it was a transitional period there, the job, you know. Of course, 9/11, I mean, for the fire department to come back after 9/11, that just truly goes to show how really how good of a foundation the fire department has to be able to come back from such a, you know, an event where you lose so many senior people. So yeah, so 123 was a great place, and all the places I worked, I was fortunate enough to go to great places. 9 and 6 was an excellent house too. You know, Lower Manhattan had the same type of buildings, the same type of fire duty that you had in, say, like a 123. You didn't have as much of it because it was Manhattan, so real estate was more money, more expensive, all that kind of stuff. You got a fire there. I always say, for me, the hardest to be a fireman is Manhattan, and you constantly are handling, you know, I'd call them crazy mix-em-ups. You can go to a high-rise on one call, go to a, you know, a high-rise residential the next call, to a brownstone, to a subway, to a transformer fire. I mean, you kind of get it all. But when I, you know, Engine 9 and Ladder 6, that I strong fight. I said somebody to Manhattan having a day fire duty, because, you know, name fire in Manhattan. We maybe didn't get any as Glenn was there. And it was
you were cutting in and out there. But I think we got the general gist of what you were saying. And we have a few questions here in the chat, and we'll go through them in order. The first question comes from Angela Ang. I'm wondering how safe the fire escapes are in older buildings in New York City.
They're not. You know, fire escapes were, you know, a risky business, because I mean, it all depends on you know, on the building too, and the property management company and the owners, right? Because I mean, I was at many a job where you went to go drop the drop ladder in the back of the building because you had the OV position and you had to get up on the fire escape in the rear, and as soon as you dropped the drop ladder, the whole ladder came down almost on your head. So you learn pretty quick to put up ground ladders at fire escapes, because they're not really great things to work off of. And, you know, fire escapes are part of the city history. I mean, they're as old as the buildings. So some buildings are great at keeping them up and some buildings are not. So fire escapes are always, you know, risky business, especially a gooseneck ladder. My first kind of job where V position, you know, the only accident was to go up and then down gooseneck ladder to the rear, which is that bendy ladder that goes over the top of the fire escape, you know, takes you to the roof. And you know, I remember a couple bolts missing and being like, "Oh, please just don't break on me now when I'm going down this thing," you know. And that was kind of living life on fire escapes, you know. So they're
next
risky.
Question.
Risky.
Sorry.
And again, it depends on who you live in.
Yeah, there's a bit of an audio delay, so I'm kind of jumping. I don't mean to, but I'll hear you about 7 seconds afterwards. So there'll be a pause. So apologies for that. The other question is, were you treated? This is the second of the three. Were you treated differently rolling over from NYPD, either better or worse than other probationary firefighters?
Pretty much they both. They found that you came over from NYPD. Yeah, they you know, they had good humor about you and stuff. But, you know, firemen, to me, firefighters always respected, at least the places I worked, we always respected our colleagues. Also say that where I work, there's back and forth a little bit type of, let's say, kind of thing. But it goes away pretty quick. Once they realize that you're into the job and you're trying to learn as much as you can, it gets pretty, that kind of stuff goes away pretty fast.
And the other thing I believe Alicia B wanted to know, to what you mentioned earlier, for those not familiar with fire service jargon, what is a can man?
Oh, so that refers to the person that's assigned to carry the fire extinguisher. So, position.
Peter, I'm sorry. We will, you're having some issues again. We will do this. We will do this over the phone. Angie, I'm going to follow your suggestion, and I'll put him on speaker. And it's, I know, Josh, it's a little glitchy. So I'm gonna just call him, and we'll do the interview over the phone that way. Because he does have a lot of great stories. I really did want to get him on. And unfortunately, it's just not being feasible right now because technology giveth and technology taketh away. Do I want to pull all my hair out right now? Yes, I do. But I will not, because we will continue with this show. So let me call Mr. Blaich, and we will do this over the phone. Bear with me. Live podcasting at its finest. Busting chops in the FDNY and the NYPD is a rite of passage, says Angela. Hey, we'll do this over the phone. We'll do this over the phone. I'm still live on YouTube, and I'll just ask my audience: can you hear Peter? Peter's on speaker right now. I know I have headphones in. Can you hear Peter? Okay. If not, I'll remove the headphones so you can. People are laughing. Let me remove the headphones so you can hear Peter. So we will just do this over the phone the rest of the way. Apologies to everyone for the technical problems, but you were discussing basically that if you're into the job, people didn't bust your chops. And of course, you were saying that it was a mixture of both, I believe, when you rolled over.
Yeah. So I of course, when they find out you come over from NYPD, and it wasn't common, but I knew people that like a good friend of mine, went to 113, a great house, and but he was a detective on the NYPD K9 unit. So Charlie eventually went back to NYPD. And it wasn't that. I mean, he was in a great house. That 113 249 is a great place. They see work there. It's just he realized that being a firefighter, he was more apt to be a police officer, and he was probably better at that. So Charlie went back and went on to have a great career on the NYPD side. But did he get his chops, as they say, broke when he went back to NYPD? I'm sure he did. And when you left NYPD and went to fire, you got your chops broke a little bit. But everybody, especially I would say fire companies that are in busy areas, they understand that the police are just as busy, and there's a camaraderie there. It's sometimes taken out of content, but there's a camaraderie there amongst police and fire that is good. And when you're at a scene of a car accident and you're in both, everybody's working, fire, police. Can you step on people's toes every now and then? And yeah, but for the most part, everything goes smooth and everybody gets along. And at the end of the day, it's a pride thing, right? Everybody wants to go there and do the best they can for the person, and sometimes it's just being maybe too aggressive or a little overzealous. Let's say you kind of have to figure it out. Like, you have to know, like, the precinct officers, and you work with them. Your ESU officers, and you work with them, and everything goes away once you know somebody, right? So when you start to see the same familiar faces on the street, whether it's fire, police, or EMS, and they stop in for a cup of coffee in the firehouse, or you're talking to them after a job together or something. Well, that edge goes away, and now you know each other on a personal basis. And now it's the same, I would assume, in the private sector, where when you get to know people, excuse me, a lot of what we do is personality based, right? So when you get to know people and how you can talk to them and how they respond to certain things, well, then everything kind of flows more smooth, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I really didn't, get that much, job breaking when I went from NYPD to FDNY. Everybody on the PD side wished me well. I still have a lot of friends, even though I was there for, a much more shorter period of time. Definitely still have many, many friends on the NYPD side that, we still talk. And, of course, a ton of brotherhood on the fire department side. So, at the end of the day, they want to go to work and do a job and go home safe to their families, and it's the same for us. I worked with many a police officer that was like, man, I can't believe you're going to the fire department. Like, I can deal with getting shot at and doing all this stuff, but fires scare me. I don't want to go to fires. And then I would, go to the fire side, and you work with firemen and be like, man, I don't ever want to be a cop. I'd rather take my chances with the fire, So, it just kind of, to me, it was kind of, to me, police and fire, if you're going to become a future police officer or a future firefighter, you have to really in your bones, because the pay isn't, the pay is okay, but for what you do and what you put on the line, it should definitely be more on both jobs. And I also include EMS in there. I'm not excluding EMS because that's a hard job too. And they don't pay you a lot, and the risk is great that you're not going to, you're not going to retire, at least healthy, and you may not retire because you get killed. So those type of jobs, you have got to really have a calling for those jobs, and they're more devotional than just money-driven kind of jobs. And it really depends on what you're geared to and what you want to put your heart into. And yeah, I mean, it was a tough decision for me to leave NYPD because I worked with some really good people, and the NYPD will bring you up pretty quick if they know you got a good head on your shoulder and you're into doing your job. And the same with the fire department. So I just was always geared more towards the fire department because I love the team concept, and that's probably what's a little different on fire. You work with teams on NYPD, but NYPD, for the most part, you're either by yourself or with a partner when you do a lot of your work, right? But I just, I played hockey as a kid, and I was big into the team, concept, and the fire department offered you like more of a team concept. You were always with a group of guys, and you were always with good officers, and in a great house, there's nothing better than working in a good, busy firehouse,
Absolutely. Peter Blaich is our guest here on the Mike to Haven podcast. This is volume 8 of the Best of the Bravest. We were having some technological problems with the video presentation, so we've pivoted to an over-the-phone interview, although I am still live on YouTube, and I appreciate all you sticking around despite the problems that we've had. So with the advent of SOC in July of 1998 and getting the squads in place, 252, 288, 270, 61, 41, now there's an element to the rescue work in the FDNY that we hadn't seen before. Had there been squads in existence prior to 98? Yeah, but never to this capacity to where now there's the hazmat element. And what you saw with that is a lot of guys who were young really wanted to be there. Guys with, at the time you had with the FDNY 4 years on the job. So guys with 4, 3, 5 years on the job that really wanted to be there, didn't know a lick, but were willing to learn, trying to do whatever they could to get to a squad. So despite the fact that you were at a pretty good house in Ladder 123, when SOC came along, how quickly did it spur on your radar?
I didn't think about going to SOC until after September 11th because I knew the job was changing and the job was take on more of a counterterrorism role. Don't forget, like after 9/11, my first kind of taste of SOC after 9/11 was they were recruiting for these hammer units. I don't know if you've ever talked about those, Mike.
No, I haven't.
But these basically, to respond to the anthrax calls and that kind of stuff. And a lot of people forget, that after, September 11th, we had some pretty other serious stuff going on in the city, like, fires didn't stop, crime didn't stop. But then you had the anthrax, case happened, and now everybody's getting, white powder calls. I mean, I can remember when the white powder calls started, because it was, all of a sudden now you're getting on the teleprinter at the firehouse, respond to a white powder call, and you're like, what is that? Like, I don't have any training in anthrax, and unless you were in a squad or a rescue, you had no hazmat training. So the local, fire companies were kind of doing this because the volume was so great, and you were really, if the squad or the rescue wasn't available, you would try to mitigate this thing, So that's when I got an interest really in going to SOC, because I knew that if I was going to stay on the job, for a longer period of time, I knew that I was going to have to learn all this new stuff, basically hazmat response and all this stuff. So, as great of the firehouses that I was in, they weren't these units that had a base in hazmat response and all this different stuff and counterterrorism. And they really moved the squads and the rescues into that role to do more of the counterterrorism response. And, and the hammer units, when the hammer units came out, the hammer teams, as they call them, they would put you and another firefighter or an officer into almost like a kind of like an ambulance-looking utility truck. And we originally started it, and they would put two people from ESU in there with you. So, and then whatever happened, powers to be, that wasn't going according to plan or wasn't operationally good. So they stopped having you ride with police officers, and then you were kind of on your own. And, they gave you counterterrorism training, and they sent you to hazmat school and stuff like that eventually. But these hammer teams kind of came out of nowhere, and they would handle, the anthrax responses that were coming in, like, two at a time at one point, So especially in like Manhattan and places like that where, high profile. So, that was like my first taste of, okay, if I want to, longevity wise and knowledge wise, if I want to stay with the fire department, it's no longer just bread and butter fire operations. It's transforming now. It already transformed into a fire and an EMS agency, and now it's transforming into a counterterrorism really agency and a counterterrorism response or a terrorism response agency too. So, nowadays on the fire department, I give it to the new people that are on, the people that are continuing on with the job, because you have to wear, many hats in the fire service, as you know now. And it's just not going to fires. It's a lot of other stuff. So that's where I got my taste to go into, a SOC company. And I was fortunate enough to go to Rescue 5. I mean, really, really senior, great people. And the funny part about Rescue 5 is, like, I went there and guys were like, oh, you're going to leave Brooklyn, you're going to leave Manhattan, you're going to Rescue 5. They're not that busy. Well, I mean, I caught really good work in Rescue 5. And the good part about Rescue 5 was we didn't run around all night on gas leaks and stuck elevators and EMS calls. You were going to like firm stuff like, trenches and high angles and dive jobs, scuba jobs. And the work that you did was good because it was quality. The saying in 123 was we had to do 20 runs to catch a buck, which wasn't hard to do because, like 123 was always, and I'm sure it still is, a very busy place to work in. And I mean, many, many sleepless nights. I mean, every now and then you get a surprise night with only a couple of runs. And I remember, like, what happened? Did the dispatcher, shut us off or something? Like, what's going on? But then I always said, like, every time you had a quiet night, you paid for it twofold your next shift in, because then you did like 3 times the amount of running for that tour to make up for it, So going to Rescue 5, I didn't do nearly as much run as the other firehouses I was in, but you substituted the time with training. So you did a lot of drills and a lot of training, and you got proficient in the more technical rescue work. And it was just a great place with great people, and I owe them a lot because they tied like everything together in my career. Really, they took someone from a busy firehouse and made them into a rescue firefighter. And even SOC within the fire department is not for everybody, because there's plenty of people that they just can't dive for a physical reason. They can't go under the water because they can't clear themselves, and they get earaches and stuff like that. And if you can't dive for a physical reason, don't go to a rescue company, because they dive and you'll just be miserable. So there were some people that all of a sudden you'd find out, like, I can wear a mask with the firefighter, but I put on an auger, which is what they use to dive, and I'm having a hard time clearing myself. And or you find out like you don't really want to hang on ropes upside down and doing the different type of drills. And they need people in those units to do those specialized skills. And being a you could take the most senior firefighter from a good truck company, a good house, a good engine company, and put him in a rescue company. That doesn't mean that he's going to be a good rescue firefighter, because it's a whole different skill set that you have to learn, and it takes a long time. I mean, when I left there, I still didn't feel anywhere near proficient. And I always say, like, the guys there, were great to me and carried me and taught me and gave me as much knowledge as possible before I got promoted. But I am grateful that when I got promoted, I had a rescue background, because especially going to a place in Manhattan, I went to Midtown when I got promoted, and it was a place where if you never were around a high-angle rescue, you never went to, someone under a train, a space case, or just a train emergency, the guys in the SOC, they go over all that stuff, and they practice all that stuff. And I came from great firehouses that were great at fighting fires and and all the stuff that goes with it. Then when you go to SOC, you realize, okay, thank God I have that base, that good base in firefighting, because now I got to learn all this other stuff. And you take an icon on the job like Bob Gallione, people like that. I mean, he's probably not going to remember me, but I remember going to a couple of fires with him in SOC, and I was like, man, that guy can just be in the right place at the right time. And he just had a way about him that what was great about, like, when you looked at those guys, like the senior guys, like in Rescue 2 at the time, because I worked a lot with those guys in 123, and then going to SOC and detailing around and working at different places. All the guys that are in your rescue and your SOC companies, they're so dedicated to what they do that they can rejuvenate your career, and they can bring you up to another level. So again, I was just blessed to work for a captain there, Billy Burke. The guy was something out of Billy Burke was something out of like how can I explain him? He was like cowboy that kind of rolled over in time. I mean, the man could not be frazzled at a fire or an emergency. The man was just, and he, if you made a mistake, it was almost like a father figure. He just had to like basically give you those eyes, and you knew he was disappointed, but he would work with you and bring you up and fill in your deficiencies. And he just had a way of doing that, that you just felt at ease with. You wanted to please him because he was a rescue captain, and he was a senior rescue captain, and he came from a good firehouse. He came from 132, which, back in the day, still does a lot of work even today, but did a tremendous amount of work back then. And you couldn't frazzle this man at any emergency. I mean, and he had a way of when he was on the scene. Like, when you have officers like that, like war year officers that, are now in these, like, companies like that, they can literally turn an emergency or an incident on its side, and they can give everybody that's operating there, some peace of mind. And when you have that much seniority at fires or emergencies, you just see like a ripple effect has on the whole operation. And again, I was fortunate enough to work for that man. And and like my first truck captain, Phil Gattani, went on to be a safety battalion chief and everything. And Phil was just I still talk to him to this day. He's just a great man. He's just a great father figure. And he could go to the craziest of fire. And 123 had its share of crazy fires, and 234, the engine, I don't want to leave them out because I loved working in the engine because you had senior guys there that would, they just knew how to read fire and position hand lines in place. And, they could give up a fire for a reason. And you'd be like, why did we give that fire up? Well, we had to protect the interior stairs. Was it more important to save the people that were coming down the stairs, or was it more important to just push into the basement and put a fire out? We knew Second Due knew that they were a good engine company, but our primary, focus was to protect the staircase and make sure that, that all the civilians got out and the truck companies could get up above. A good truck company is only as good as a good engine company. And I learned that in 123 and 234. And that, to me, still stays true. If you have a good engine company, you can have a really good truck company. But you're not going to have a good truck company without a good engine company. And that was what was taught to me by those war year guys, And that, to me, still stays true through the whole fire service to this day. Good truck company is only as good as a good engine company because the truck can only do so much. And if you have a good engine in place, you just get I always said, when 234, 280, 249, when they were at a box with you, I didn't have a fear of going to the floor above. I didn't have a fear of making an extra push to do a search because I knew I had great engine companies there that were going to make sure that they had water, and if you got in trouble, they were going to burn up they were going to burn up in order to make sure that you got out. And that's an art that it has to work together. You have to have the truck and engine work together. And, there's a lot of back and forth, chop breaking and everything between the engine and the truck. But at the end of the day, the engine runs the house, and they always said the truck is a guest. But, you talk to any of the old timers, they'll tell you that's true because the engine runs the house, keeps everything in the firehouse straight. They're going to go there and put the fire out. And like we say, the engine puts the fire out and the truck goes to metal day, and it was always told to me the best truck firefighters come from engine companies or have engine experience. And I was blessed. And then I got to go to a great engine company, 9 Engine. And that was a great engine company. And it allowed the truck company, Ladder 6, to be a great truck company because it had a great engine in it. So you're talking 2 different boroughs, but the same attitude, right? 9 and 6 in Chinatown and the 4th Battalion, it may have not done as much fire duty as the 3/8 Battalion and the 15th Division in Brooklyn, but what made it 2 great places was the attitude, and what they did at fires was the same. It was just one place got more of them, more fires, more emergencies, and one place didn't get it, but the quality was the same when they turned out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I keep saying it, but I was truly blessed to work in great firehouses amongst great people.
Peter Blaich is our guest here at the Mike to Raven podcast. We're approaching, I should say, the 1.5 hour mark. So I'll hit on a few things, and I'll have to bring you back, and we'll do a redo and cover the many things that we didn't get to tonight, unfortunately, due to the difficulties. But nonetheless, I have enjoyed hearing from you. So I wanted to ask, when you got to the point of being a lieutenant, now you're in a leadership position, and that can weigh on people. You talked about how SOC isn't for everybody. A leadership position isn't for everybody. So how do you morph into a leadership role? And give a good example, not necessarily to the senior guys who have been there, done that, but to the younger guys coming on who are now looking to you for guidance.
So, when you make that switch, the hardest switch to make is from firefighter to lieutenant, because now it's not that you're not part of the guys. The lieutenant and the captain in the firehouse are still kind of part of the guys, but they're also management. So, you're not going to partake in, the funny stuff that happens in the firehouse, like maybe short sheeting. If you've ever heard the terminology, short sheeting someone's bed, that would be, kind of a goof in the places I work. Like, you have a busy night, you're in and out, and hey, let's short sheet his bed, so like, or her bed, whatever, and it's all playful banter. And I always say, you learn this really quick in the fire service, probably more so in the fire service than on the NYPD side, but it's true. If they don't break your chops, they don't care about you.
Right. So
if they leave you alone and don't talk to you, you better do a self-assessment, because if you're not part of the brotherhood then. If you can take a joke and give a joke, then you're part of the brotherhood. So, it was common, like, you try to run upstairs before, one of the guys or girls, came back off the rig and made their way to the bunk room, and you short sheet their bed, so when they get in it, they're like, oh man, I can't get in my bed, like it's short sheeted, and I mean, it's just little kind of funny stuff like that. Everybody get a laugh over it, then you're back out the door anyway on the next run. But, that's the thing that sometimes people, it's hard to get sometimes when you're new to the fire service, right? It's like, oh, they're picking on me. Well, what kind of picking on it is it? Is it picking on it like, as a colleague, and not, listen, there's times when everybody goes overboard, but there's a camaraderie there, and if you're not part of it, it's kind of weird to figure it out. But if they can joke with you and you can joke with them, then you're in. And once you're in like forever, So it's a camaraderie thing, and and it's a little different now because it's just the society is just different. So, but we did some jokes on each other, and everything was always fun and a good time. Yeah, I mean, the transitional role to the fire officer is now you're not involved in any of that stuff, because now you're like a manager. So you kind of have to separate a little bit, from the brotherhood to a degree. But at the same time, now they're looking to you, at a fire or emergency to keep them safe. My job as the officer was not to tell firefighters what to do. My job as an officer, at least the way that I was instructed, came up, was my job is to tell them what not to do, what's going to get them hurt. So in a good firehouse and good fire company, the firefighters are going to be pulling ahead, and they're going to go through a wall of fire to get to anybody, regardless of creed, color, religion. If you're a Muslim from space, if there's a fire in downtown Manhattan or Brooklyn, places I worked, those people that get on those fire trucks are going to come, and they're going to go through a wall of fire to get to you. As the officer, if it's not practical and I'm going to lose firefighters over saving somebody that's possibly maybe expired, that's when you got to make that call to the officer, and your job is to more hold them back when it's too dangerous, or a life can't be saved. So it's a big responsibility. I was told by my dad when I first got promoted, he goes, the hardest tool that you're going to handle in the fire service is a flashlight and a radio. Because he's coming from the war, where basically, not everybody had a radio on the truck,
Right.
So he's like, you don't understand how heavy a radio and a flashlight can be. And that's because that's the officer's tools now. And it is. I mean, as the officer, you have to solve any, interpersonal conflicts, just who's having a disagreement with each other. I mean, as a lieutenant in the New York City Fire Department, I found myself as both a marriage counselor, a father figure, just somebody that somebody could come to and tell you, hey, I'm having problems. I can't get this, I don't understand this. Or I'm having, hey, what's going on with Joe? How come Joe's not, Joe's just different, he's having problems at home. Okay, let's, hey, let me talk to Joe, make sure everything's okay. That's your role. Like when you become an officer, it's not to, put on the collar brass and pound your chest and say, look at me, I got promoted. It's really, are you willing to take it on where it's not all about yourself anymore in your career. It's about the people that you're working with and how can you bring them up, and you have to take care of them. And it was. I thank God that I came from good places and had a good base, because I needed to tap every ounce of that when I got promoted. I'll never forget it. Tommy Galvin was the chief of training, and Tommy Galvin was my dad's probie in 123, way back in the day, and he went on to be, a big chief on the New York City Fire Department. He was the chief of training, and what a very knowledgeable and great chief and great officer. But he was my dad's probie in 123, and when I first got promoted, he grabs me grabs me on the side one day, and he's like, I went to go into a fire one day, and your dad held me back because, it was too dangerous, and there was no life to save in there. And I was mad at him for a minute, but then I realized, I would have got myself all burnt up for going in there. He goes, so your dad had the ability to hold me back from that, and then he had the ability to deal with my attitude after it. And then I, went on to look at your dad and go, I want to try to be an officer like that. And of course, Tommy Galvin went up to be the chief of training, and he was a great chief of training. I mean, he brought back, the mother of all drills, if you talked about that, the MOAD, because, fire duty went down. It wasn't like it was in the 70s and 80s and maybe even the early 90s. So, fire duty, it just went down in the volume, right? Which is good. That means something good for the city. Like, you don't city burnt down, right? Then you have Detroit, and you have us all with no money, no pensions, no any of that good stuff. So fire duty is both good and bad. When you have too much of it, you have a city that's falling apart. Just like if you have a city that's falling apart because you have too much crime, that's not good either. So you got to strike that balance. And as an officer, you have to strike the balance in your firehouse, and you have to, you have to be respectful to senior guys, and you have to let them run the firehouse when they can, and then you have to know when the officer has to jump in because now something's getting out of hand, or I need to take a different role or different look at this. So being an officer in the New York City Fire Department, in particular, nowadays is not an easy task. And the lieutenant's rank is a great rank because you're still close up to the guys, that you can keep a pulse on them, and they'll listen to you. A lot of times, maybe say over the captain or the battalion chief, because you're only one rank apart, and you're more of the father figure to those guys. When the captain comes into the kitchen, he's going to put the hammer down. But before the captain comes into the kitchen of the firehouse, he's going to turn to the lieutenant and say, "Hey, see what you can do with this, or this is what I'd like to see done." And a lot of times, the captain sends the lieutenant in there, and the lieutenant, can go back and forth with the guys a little bit and the girls, and then basically kind of balance things out. And if you can't get it done as a lieutenant, well then any firehouse in the city, the guys and girls are going to know, well, if the captain comes in here because the lieutenant asked us to do something and now it can't get done, that hammer's going to come down, And then, and of course if the battalion chief comes in, then the hammer's really going down. And then forget it, the deputy comes in, and then you're in trouble. So, but lieutenant's rank is a great rank. I love their minute of it. And, the Tommy Galvin story was, I'll never forget it, when we all went through flips, where they nicknamed that because they flip you into an officer. They flip you out of the firefighter role, and they flip you into being an officer. Right. And when they flip you into being an officer, I'll never forget it, Tommy Galvin came in and he goes, now listen, he goes, congratulations on your promotion. Rather you're going to stay at the lieutenant's rank or make your way up. You're in the officer's rank now, so, kind of welcome to the club, as they say. But he said, just remember, you put yourselves in this position. You studied hard, you took the test, and you got promoted. So just remember that. There's going to be hard days ahead of you as an officer, and you got to remember that, hey, you put yourself here studying and making all this work. And the fire department will give you all the support to nurture you and make you into a good officer. But it's going to be, it's not the same as being on the back of the truck with the guys, because at the end of the day, the officer's on the hook for what happens, right? Mm-hmm. So it is a different role, different position. It isn't for everybody. I mean, the best job to me in the New York City Fire Department is being a fireman. That is the best job. And I think anybody I think that you could talk to even the current, staff chiefs, Tommy Richardson, chief of department now, who 38 battalion guy from Brooklyn, 123, 234. I'm sure if you talk to him, he's going to tell you, yeah, I mean, Tommy Richardson is gold. I mean, he's just a great person, a great individual, great leader, great chief officer. But I bet you if you told him, especially after working downtown for a couple of years, I bet you if you asked him, he'd probably say, I just want to go back and be in a busy firehouse again as a fireman, And pretty much, I think any officer will tell you that the best job on the New York City Fire Department is firefighter. And then, when you get promoted, that's what you want to do. You just have to look at, like, it's not about you anymore. It's about your company, your guys, and the girls, and making sure that everything goes smooth. And it's a big responsibility. I mean, your decisions can get somebody killed. Your decisions can save somebody, and your decisions can make a PR nightmare for the firemen as well. Mm-hmm. Which I'm sure we're all, with social media nowadays, it's not hard to do. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a good, tough transition, and again, I think to get promoted, you should have at least 10 years on the job. I think that's still true to this day. Because I don't, especially nowadays with everything different, with EMS, hazmat, terrorism, all this other stuff that's happening. Even technology, like tonight we're trying to work out the phone, and my apologies to you and everybody listening. But
it's okay.
I had my teenager boys working on it, and so that so we're getting through that. But it's hard today nowadays, I think, to be an officer in the New York City Fire Department, and it's probably harder when I was on, and the job is younger. So you really have to be on your game as an officer now, because when I first became an officer too, I mean, it was you still had some seniority around, and a lot of the stuff, the day in and day out of stuff that went on could be handled by the senior guys in the company, and so even conflicts, who's supposed to be in the Rwanda Mutual, and okay, but we have it covered. I mean, good firehouses, they kind of run themselves, and the officers, supervise and work through the emergencies and the major stuff. But a good firehouse, the senior people can take care of what's going on there before it even hits the officer's desk. But as you lose that seniority, as the officer starts to get more piled on his desk, because, when you have a younger job, like the job nowadays is young. So you just have the stuff that, a new generation handles. You've got cell phones, you've got all this stuff out there that wasn't common when I first got on. And, it makes life hard for the officer sometimes, But yeah, definitely a tough transition. Definitely not for everybody, but it's something that everybody could do. Like if you get appointed, as a firefighter for the New York City Fire Department, to me, you've already, just like, the old saying goes, that's truly, it was Edward R. Croker, right? One of the chief of departments, from back in the day. Historically, his famous quote was, the first act of heroism anybody takes is swearing in as a New York City firefighter. Everything else after that, is just second. And I believe that when I was on, and I still believe that to this day. Like once you take the oath to protect life and property as a New York City firefighter, that to me, just that swearing in moment when you decide to do that, you get through probie school and now you're getting assigned to a company. That to me is your first act of heroism, because that means that you're willing to put it all on the line, for somebody else, for a stranger that just happens to live in the city of New York, or, that has an emergency that you have to go to. So everything else after that, becoming an officer and everything like that, anybody could do it. To me, it's that first hurdle, and it's that first fire you go into. If you can go to that first fire and not completely lose it, and go into a situation where, the heat's driving you down to the floor, and it's utter chaos and confusion the first fire you go to. And if you can get through that first spot and say to yourself, okay, I can do that again, that to me, even if it was a textbook, bread and butter fire that went out, fairly easy. If you can be willing to do that at your test, and anything else, you can accomplish anything else you want on the job. It's just a matter of what you want to do.
Hank Millay is now in the chat as well. Shout out to Hank, of course. Hank was volumes 3 and 4, as I mentioned at the top of the Best of the Bravest, Rescue 1, Squad 288. I'm actually going to be bringing Hank back in early next year for the listeners. I'll explain. I don't want to spoil it now, but it's going to be Hank and a couple of other people for a specific event that Hank responded to. So be on the lookout for that. But Peter Blaich is our guest here. This is volume 8 of the Best of the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. We've worked through the technical problems, and Peter's over the phone now. So I guess, before I get to the concluding segment, I do want to ask you, there's that moment where everybody knows if they don't have a health problem that forces them off of the job, there's a time in which they're doing it and they realize, yeah, you know what? I think it's time. So when did the light bulb go off over your head telling you, okay, I've had a good run. I did 3 years in the PD. I've done 21 in the FD. I've been blessed, as you said earlier. It's time to retire.
So for me, it was a combination of things. I still have teenage boys, and I want to be actively involved in their lives. And when you first get appointed, like even when I first got appointed to NYPD, when I was there, I'm like, okay, I got 20 years. 20 years I can retire. Retirement sounds like this great thing. Like, okay, in 20 years I can retire from the city of New York, and wow, I'll be down in Naples, Florida, on the beach every day or whatever. And of course, life doesn't really go like that. So now, all of a sudden, 20 years comes and goes. Like, wow, and for me, 20 years went so fast. And then, I finally finished up. I actually had 25 when I got out, and when I got out with my 25 years, or I knew it was time to retire. What really started to get me on a personal level was I started working with firefighters whose dads I worked with who were killed on 9/11. And all of a sudden I started going in, when I was covering as a lieutenant, I'd be working in firehouses, and I get the BF4, the rock list, which is, where everybody was positioned for the tour that day. If you were an engine or a truck, who's got the nozzle, who's got the backup, who's the can man, who's the irons, or can firefighter, irons firefighter, all that stuff, right? All of a sudden I'd look down the name and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, Bergen, man, I worked with John, his dad. His dad was like, an icon figurehead for me on the job. And he got killed in Rescue 5 on 9/11. And now I'm working, for a tour with his son. And I'm like, and that kind of started going on for me. And I started it was a tough time. It was tough for me to work with somebody's kid. And the last thing I wanted to do as an officer, like the worst thing that can happen to you as a fire officer in the New York City Department is a fire that you go to, you lose one of the guys or girls that's under you. You lose one of the firefighters that's, assigned to your company that's working with you, because the thing with the New York City Fire Department is the officers really put it on themselves to make sure that everybody that's on the truck is going to come home that day in one piece. And if you don't have that attitude, you shouldn't be an officer. But that's kind of the traditional role of the New York City Fire Department and officers. It's been like that for, almost 200 years. The officer is tasked with taking the people to that call, that emergency, and making sure that those people come home safe. And I started to work with all these different, they're not kids, men and women, but I knew, their parents. I knew their dad. I had a close connection with their dad. And I'm saying to myself, if we get a bad fire tonight and I lose this person, I can't go to, Maryland or somebody else and say, oh my God, I will, your son died in a fire today. Your son, this happened. he's got a disability and it's not good. He's probably not coming back. And being a dad myself, I knew when I started having those thoughts that I was going to be less and less effective. And 9/11 really, if 9/11 doesn't happen, I'd probably stay there and do 40 years, but because I love the job that much. But 9/11 changed the job on various levels, and when you lose 343 people, it's tough to sometimes individually bounce back from that. And I really started to doubt myself. I started to kind of doubt myself because I think the time period that I was on, so many firefighters died, even previous to 9/11, and now 9/11 was just over the top with the amount of loss for the department. And every firehouse you go into, there's multiple memorials because we really lived that. We really lived and never forget. And for me, it was like I needed a change to be there for my kids, and I really had to make a decision to either stay with the fire department or to try to raise 3 boys the best I could. And it was really starting to affect me with just the different stuff that I'm doing. 25 years of service, you really, I wish I could forget a lot of the stuff that I was involved in, but you can't. And then that for to me, it was a combination of, okay, I can leave now, healthy enough to be around my kids and raise them, and maybe they'll become cops, firemen down the road, who knows? But family became important to me, and I kind of felt I had to make a choice on a personal level, and I feel good about it. I mean, I miss the job every day. I miss the brotherhood. I miss the people. But you don't lose the people. You lose the job. You lose the you lose the uniform. You lose the job. And to be honest with you, any retiree will tell you the same thing. I don't care if it's NYPD, FDNY, or FDNY EMS. Any retiree will tell you the same thing. When you go back to that EMS station, when you go back to that precinct, when you go back to that firehouse, when you're retired, it's not the same. They're always respectful to you because you retired from the job, but you don't have the same camaraderie, same stories, because you're not coming up with the same people. So I always say, like, in retirement, to me, like, closest friends and your true brothers are the ones that you keep when you retire. And I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of those people in my life. And, when we get together with retiree groups and stuff, we're still all firefighters at the end of the day. It's just, now we're retired. So it's different, but it's good too. And it takes you, like, retirement was a bigger adjustment for me than you can imagine, because it really hurt a lot to leave something I loved so much. But I knew I had to do it for family reasons. And I'm glad I did it. I miss it every day. But again, the same people that I came up with and the same people that I had those experiences with, they're not there anymore. They're pretty much mostly retired. So I'm always going to have those connections. But I'm just not going to have the new connections with the people. So, retirement is a transitional period. It really is. And once you leave something like, FDNY after so many years, it's hard to find yourself. It really is. And you have to work on it every day. And, I'm still working on it. I still miss the job every day, and I'm still working on it. But, I live for my kids now. And so that's, that's a good thing, right?
Absolutely. And as long as you can be there, as you said earlier, all the more so. Well, like I said, despite the issues that we had technologically, it was still a good show. Like I said, I will bring you back in the future to cover the topics that we didn't get to tonight, unfortunately. But we have a segment here that we always wrap up with rapid fire, 5 hit run questions from me and 5 answers from you. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Mike.
All right. So first, if not for the FDNY or the NYPD, what career could you have seen yourself pursuing and enjoying?
Bartender.
Well, that's a good answer. All right. I understand. Yeah. Hey.
Not because I'm an alcoholic or anything, but I knew, like, I just, there's nothing like a good bartender, right, that you kind of feel at home with, right?
Exactly.
So sometimes you can go sit there and have a seltzer water or a beer, right? But if you have a good bartender, he's going to make you feel at home, right?
No, absolutely. And by the way, Hank Millay comments and this is true. Each group that works together has a certain chemistry, especially in a busy house. Once personnel starts changing, the chemistry changes and things change. So to your point earlier, absolutely. And I think that goes for any job, not just necessarily first response. There's a great camaraderie when you have people that you've been there with for a long time through thick and thin, I should say. Second, favorite thing, if you ever were a chauffeur, favorite thing about driving the rig?
I personally, this is just a personal, I'll probably get beat up over this, but I personally feel like the best position on the New York City Fire Department is being the chauffeur of a rear mount area, because that's a position that you usually get assigned by the officer to watch the newer guys that are in the company, and you're almost like the free safety. You get the roof man to the roof, and you may help him up there depending on the circumstances, or you might drop down and do a top floor search. You might keep the aerial up at the roof and run and help the OV get into position. That was a position that the officer takes, the captain of the company will take under real careful consideration, because he knows how vital you are to kind of filling in and figuring out where there's a gap, and that's usually left up to the chauffeur to fill in. So I loved being a ladder company chauffeur, and I loved being the chauffeur rear mount aerial. It's way better than being in the tower ladder, because, but you can put the stick down and go home, and when it's the fifth alarm and they're still blowing water on it, pumping water on it, if you're in a tower ladder, you're going to be there all night long.
So, a true thing. Third, and if this is not G-rated, you can say pass. Funniest call you ever responded to?
So, I got to send you the picture. We could probably do that if you get me back on after this mess up I made with the internet. But,
well, yeah, let's try it. You can try it, and the picture can hopefully be displayed. So try accessing that link, and I'll wait for you for sure.
There's a picture of me with 3 camels when I was a lieutenant in Ladder 2, and we had a fire, kind of like one of my first fires as an assigned officer there. Mm-hmm. And, it was the holiday season, December 2008, I want to say. And they had a fire in Radio City Music Hall behind the stage, and it was, they were doing a Christmas spectacular, so they had camels and hay, and they had the animals at a different location, and they would bring them on to kind of parade them across the stage, during the manger scene and all that. If you've ever seen like the Christmas spectacular rock
right.
at Radio City Music Hall, right? Yeah. And so we get an alarm activation with came in as an alarm, and then it came in as a water flow. So usually that's kind of a trade you learn in Manhattan. You respond to a lot of what they call bells and smells in the borough of Manhattan, right? A lot of fire alarms, and people smell this, and you're searching all day, and sometimes it turns out to be nothing. Well, I should say a lot of times it turns out to be just an investigation and not really an emergency or an incident, right? Mm-hmm. But so I'm in Manhattan, and we're running around. I was working at 24, and we were working the night before we got murdered. It was one of those cold nights where the pipes froze in all the garages and all the high rises, and then we started to warm up a little bit, so now all the pipes are breaking, and we were doing, like, I think we were up to something like 30 cold, just the truck, and it was frozen sprinkler, broken pipe, water flow, all that good stuff. And then in the afternoon, still running around crazy on all different types of alarms, and we get a call for an alarm activation with a water flow, and then as we're going there, we're getting a call for smoke in Radio City Music Hall. So I feel like, okay, well, maybe it's something, but it's Radio City Music Hall, so I mean, there's a lot of police officers standing right outside. There's a lot of security. I mean, usually when you go to one of those places, it's high risk because there's a lot of people there. The show is going on. But then you show up and you have a fire, and you're like, ooh, this is like, it gets real really quick, because now you got an occupied, open public assembly, and you have a fire. And what it was they had a fire behind the stage we saved 3 camels. There were 3 camels that were getting ready to be taken onto the stage, and as part of the major scene, and everybody's out of the building, and we were the first to truck, because normally it's ladder 4, but ladder 4 was out at a fire on the west side, and we were now first due into Radio City. That's something that hasn't changed in the fire department. If you look at the amount of truck companies that are in Midtown, there's basically 2. You got ladder 2 and you got ladder 4. They cover a big area. Like, we did a lot of running, covered a lot of square mileage, for a Manhattan company, both ladder 2, ladder 4, and you do a lot of running. And, we wound up, everybody building and the chief's trying to figure out, are we missing anybody? And, the stage crew's there, and how many people did you have at the performance, all that good stuff, And meanwhile, I tell the chief, hey, I got 3 camels we got to get out. And the smoke condition was pretty bad. So I don't know if you've ever tried to move a camel.
No, I have not. I can't say that I have.
Yeah, they don't really move. And that was something that I never expected to do as both a firefighter and a fire officer, was get involved in trying to move 3 camels out of Radio City Music Hall to the outside, So I had that picture with me and guys that were working that day standing next to these camels, and the chief made a big thing out of it. And anyway, the senior guys were, well done, you came here and you saved 3 camels. It was, you can imagine all the jokes that followed with that. But that's being a firefighter in Manhattan. That's being a firefighter in Midtown. You just don't know all you're going to go to. And like I said, thank goodness that they were more receptive, that they wanted to get out of the place just as much as we wanted to get them out.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of moved. But they spit a lot. If they step on your foot, they'll probably break it. And it was pretty interesting to get firemen to figure out how we can move these camels out of Radio City Music Hall. And then you get them onto the street now, trying to find who's the handler, and who controls the animals and all that good stuff. And of course, there's other chaos, fire trucks, and these things are sitting there and they're looking at you, and you're trying to, okay, just take it easy, buddy. You don't come running down the street on me, you get hit by a car or something,
Absolutely.
So I always remember that as one of my funnier type calls. And then one prior to that was, I don't know if you remember, I'll date myself a little bit, but I don't know if you remember Richard Simmons. He was a famous,
yep.
He was
yep.
into all the fitness and everything.
Yeah.
And he would, he was a healthy guy himself, lost a ton of weight, and then he did all this, he was in 80s, 90s, I guess that's when he was big,
mm-hmm.
and he did all these fitness shows, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, when I was a firefighter, he goes to the Albany projects, I'll never forget it, and there was a very, very big person, let's say, in one of the apartments there. And he was there to rescue them, to get them out of the apartment, and, he was going to take them under his wing and lose weight, whole thing with his show and everything, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, we couldn't pick him up. The person was that big. And the only way we could get them out was we had to take the frame of 2 windows out in the projects and then put them on 111's tower ladder at the time and move them down, And I just remember it's terrible because he's a person and you're trying to give him as much dignity as you can, but you literally just took him out of, the window of his apartment because he wouldn't fit through the door. So, and he's in dire need of medical attention. So, I just remember him. It was like a surreal scene for me, and it's one of those. I shouldn't say it's funny, but you kind of, it's fire department humor, because
right.
You see so much. And now, okay, we're at this scene and we're trying to remove this, heavy person from the apartment, and the only way we can do it is to take out. We had to take out 2 windows. Rescue 2 had to come in, and they had to shore up the window sill so we didn't collapse the brick facade. I mean, it was like an ordeal to get this person. And we get them out of the tower ladder and get them lowered to the ground, and EMS is taken over, and he really needed medical attention. And all I remember is the radios playing in the background, people clapping. Richard Simmons is there doing a dance in the street, and I mean, I'm just like, man, this is when they say you get a when you join the NYPD or the FDNY or FDNY EMS, they say you get a front row ticket to the greatest show on earth.
Yep.
Well, you get a ticket to the greatest show on earth, and I can still talk to old timers, and guys that I came up with, and those. Cause remember that crazy call we went on where we had to basically break out of his apartment. That's one of those things I put in there as I guess a happy moment. And you're trying to give the person as much dignity as they can, but literally they got the band set up, and Richard Simmons is there, and now they get the person down, and there's like a round of applause from the entire neighborhood, and people are singing and dancing, and the radio's playing, and they were shooting graffiti up in confetti up in the air and everything, and I was like, wow, this is bizarre and amazing at the same time,
Absolutely.
And, so I would say those two kind of calls, put it into play, and then through my career. As you know, I was one of the responding officers to the Miracle Hudson, Staten Island ferry crash. Interesting calls like that. And when I was I was actually detailed I was actually filling in for an officer vacancy in Ladder 7 when we responded to the Miracle on the Hudson. And I was we went to a fire we went to a fire on the west side of Manhattan. It was a second alarm. It actually turned out to be a fatal fire. Someone that lived in the apartment where the fire originated actually was burnt and succumbed to their injuries. And it went to a second alarm, and like 3 truck made a bunch of rescues at that fire, I remember, and 1 truck. And anyway, we were the extra truck on the second alarm, and we actually worked at that fire, pretty serious fire, and we were taken up from that fire, and we had a detail by all the firehouses kind of in that Manhattan area. They had a detail bike because you get to work, you double park your car, you hope you don't get a ticket, you hope it doesn't get towed until the next shift leaves. That tour gets off duty, and you try to find up a parking spot, because parking is a premium even for firefighters and police officers, and EMS personnel, especially in Manhattan. So you finally get yourself in a parking spot, and then if you get detailed out because, somebody's short in another company, or you're the extra guy in that company, a lot of companies in Manhattan, they would use a detail bike, which was basically a bike with a big basket on it, and you could put your gear in there, and you could, pedal to the next firehouse, because the firehouses in Manhattan are fairly close, but they're close for a reason, because you can't get anywhere because of the traffic, and you have high life, high occupancy everywhere, so you need, companies to be closer together there, because you just can't get in, with the traffic and everything in Manhattan going on. So the detail bike got hit by a cab. The member didn't get hurt, but a cab ran it over. So it was at a bike shop where the guy would, fix the bikes for us, and we're sitting on the west side of Manhattan, and somebody comes up to the cab of Ladder 7, and I'm the officer, and knocks on the window, and he goes, "Hey, there's a plane down in the Hudson River." And I was like, "Yeah, it's probably one of the seaplanes that lands all the time by the Intrepid over there." And it wasn't common, but it wasn't uncommon for Manhattan Dispatch to get calls about a plane down in the Hudson, and they send a whole bunch of companies there, and it turns out to be one of these water tax planes, one of the ones that can land in the water and take off and stuff,
Right.
And I'm like, "Yeah, it's probably one of those planes." And he's like, "Okay," and then he walks on, and then another person walks up like a second later, a second two later, and they're like, "Hey, there's a plane down in the Hudson River." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's probably one of," because I'm listening to the radio, and I kind of have a view of the river from where I was sitting in the rig. The guys were in there, getting the bike back and paying the guy for fixing the bike and everything. And he's like, no, it's a big plane. I don't think it's right. I don't think it should be there. And I'm like, "Okay, thank you for telling me that." Now I'm like, "All right, let me go double check this," So I kind of turn around the corner, and there is, a commercial airline with people on the wings floating down the west side of Manhattan. And I wound up being one of the companies to kind of call it in. And, I remember one of the chiefs calling me, and being like, Pete, like, you know, you got a lot of people coming there. Like, you know, they give it 1060 for it and everything. Like, you got a plane down? I'm like, Pete, no, it's a commercial jetliner. It's like it's down. There's people on the wings, and we got in there pretty quick, and we wound up commandeering one of those fast ferries, and that would go out to the, you know, basically a fast ferry just came in. It was you know, offloading the passengers, and I go up onto the boat, myself and a couple other, you know, companies that were there. And I'm like, let's get this boat and go out to this plane and see if we can start getting these people, you know? And I could see the fireboat and the dip making its way and the NYPD harbor units making their way. But, you know, we can't do anything on land. The boat's in the water. So let's get on the boat. Let's get on the ferry and take the ferry over there. And it was a brand new guy he literally just got out of the Navy like a couple of months before that. And now he got his own boat. And he was gonna, you know, was the captain for one of the fast ferries, you know. And I said to him, I said, hey, we got to commandeer this boat, get out there and try to help those people. And he looked at me and he goes, what does that mean, commandeer it? I said, well, we got to kind of take it over, and we need you to drive us out there so we can start getting people. And he looks at me and he goes, this is like my first, like, it was like his first week working with the fast ferries. And he goes, I don't know what the rules are on that, but if you're commandeering it, then my boat's your boat. And it was kind of a funny moment. And he, you know, took us out there. And my downfall with that whole operation, right, going back to the officers' rank, is after the whole thing is over, we are, you know, everybody's grateful. The people that we got off the plane were thankful. And of course, you know, the entire city showed up. You got people on fast ferries, on tugboats, NYPD, FDNY, I mean, helicopters, you name it. Everybody's chipping in to make this, you know, miracle on the Hudson a miracle. And this person comes up to us and they're like, hey, I really want to take your picture. Thank you guys for, you know, for getting us off the plane, and we take a picture. So I take a picture with the guys, and it just was one of those things I wasn't thinking of. We just take a picture, but we took a picture in front of the bar on the fast ferry. Woo! The next day, it hit the paper, and boom. I mean, headquarters was calling me, like, you can't take a picture in front of a bar. It doesn't look good. I said, Chief, I totally understand that. Nobody was drinking. That was further from anybody's mind. We were there to do a rescue mission. I said, that's on me. I said, I just didn't realize the bar was in the background, you know. Right. And, you know, they even downtown understood that. They got a chuckle out of it, and they were like, okay, listen. You know, you're probably going to have you've got the biggest batter boy to the biggest, okay, don't do that again in the history of the department, you know? So it was just, you know, it was a harmless thing that none of us thought about, and we were just happy that we were able to take part in such a, you know, a unique, say, rescue operation. And, you know, that was on me as the officer. So, like, you know, it all comes full circle, like we're talking about the responsibility of the officer. I mean, if I would have known it now, I would have took a picture, you know, in the front of the boat as opposed to in the middle of the boat. But we were freezing, and the inside of the boat where the bar was, and we just didn't think about it. We just took a picture and stuff. So sometimes I don't miss that politics of the game, though. You know what I mean?
Right. No, of course.
It caused a lot of headaches and a lot of phone calls. I got a lot of phone calls from chiefs I never knew after that. But you know, that's just kind of life in the big city. You know, being a fireman, firefighting. You know, so that's always a funny moment in my repertoire, I guess you could say. And I still get phone calls on that from the guys I worked with, the other guys that know the story. They still call me and they go, yeah, you find any planes in River lately? You know, I'm like, no, we're good.
Oh boy.
So
I'll ask you a couple more. Yeah, absolutely. So the last two questions are the rapid fire, sticking with the bar theme. The fourth is favorite bar or restaurant in New York City.
Oh, I gotta say McSorley's, man. I like a good McSorley's fan.
All right, McSorley's. Yeah, for sure. You can't go wrong with that. And the fifth and the final question of the rapid fire, and it's been a great conversation with you, is what advice would you give? And we kind of touched on it, but nonetheless, what advice would you give somebody coming on the job now?
I would say if you're new to the profession, I would say the fire department, surround yourself with good people. right? So it's a job of personalities. Get to know people that can handle different personalities. Because at the end of the day, you live with these guys and girls, on many aspects, you're closer to them and you live with them more than you do your own family, right? So, families fight, right? We don't like to advertise it, but families fight and families have conflicts, right? So get to know who are senior guys in your firehouse or senior girls in your firehouse that can make a problem go away and not add to a problem. One of the senior guys in 123, Tommy McGoldrick, is like an icon to me. And he'd always say the magic line he always had is, kill him with kindness. And Tommy McGoldrick had a bad thing to say about anybody on the job, even if the person just happened to be, a horrible, say, person. He always found a way to kill him with kindness. And by doing that, he could make them do the right thing. So, I learned from that type of senior guy. So I would say, especially if you're going to go from firefighting to, say, the officer's rank, learn how to kill them with kindness and learn how to diminish problems and not add to problems. But in order to do that, when you first get on, you'll see, like, who is the senior person in the firehouse that anybody can go to with not just a question of, hey, ladders 3, top 4, tenement fire, where do I go? You need to have that, like, without a doubt, and that should be the topic of conversation on every tour you go to work. You should always be asking questions. Never be afraid to ask questions. Like, there really is no stupid question in the fire department, because what we do, a little part of the individual not intertwining with the team, or one person off in your company, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So instead of getting on the person that's the weakest link, how can you bring that person up so that your company is even that much stronger? And you have to like look at the senior people that are in your firehouse and go, okay, who's that senior guy? Who's the senior guy that I can go to with not even, with any firematic question, any, emergency question, but also who's the person that I can confide with because, hey, I'm having a bad problem with my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my wife or one of my kids. Every firehouse still has that father figure person. It may be the officer, it may be a senior man or a senior girl in that firehouse. Find out whoever that is and like mimic them, follow them, do what they do, see how they solve conflicts, see how they solve issues. And it's not longer just good enough to be like a great firefighter. You have to be a great firefighter that can get along with everybody else, can be receptive to different cultures, different personalities. Who's the person that can go on the scene in the neighborhood and at a water leak or an overflowed toilet or some of the calls that, multiple times we do that it's not really the glamorous part of the job, if you want to say. But who can go to that call and mitigate that call just like they could a serious fire? Because, for the most part, right, the public sees us as problem solvers. So if you go to a water leak and you break the toilet or you get, you leave the building and you kick a cat because you're upset because you're in the same apartment 3 times for the same overflowing toilet or something, something that that's getting to you now because the person you feel is taking advantage of the system and just calling you for nonsense, right? We've all been there. But who's the senior person in that company that can not only make that person feel good when they leave, but make everybody okay on the rig and get everybody to say, hey, listen, at the end of the day, this is our job. If they call us 18 other times back to fix the same, toilet or the same part of the stove, we're going to do it 18 times because that's what we do with the New York City Fire Department. So I learned from senior guys, because when you work in busy right? Especially like, Brooklyn, Harlem, the Bronx, all those, the places that still have the reputations that are still, doing, good work and stuff. And you learn that it's not all about, the 2 rooms of fire anymore. It's about, how can I fix that person's, water leak? And you know what, like senior guys would tell me, like after you've gone to the same, housing project for the same stuck elevator or the same, smell of something or the same water leak, the reality is these people are calling you because they don't have any other person to call. The city or the building department is not fixing their problems, so the fire department gets pushed to the fire department. But these people are looking at you. You can go, like I always said, you could go and you could mitigate a water leak in an apartment complex, right? And you go there and you can tell that the people are having hard times, that they're down on their luck, financially, whatever. But I was always surprised where you fix something like a water leak in somebody's apartment, and then you come back to the firehouse, and then 2 days later, there's this woman and her church parishioners knocking on the door saying, I really don't have anything, but we made this cake for you guys at the church. We really want you guys to have it. Thank you for helping me with that problem. And you may not see that as the initial person that went to that, to that apartment 3 or 4 times, but now the next shift that gets it is like, okay, thank you very much. And you get the senior guy that now calls up and says, hey, or lets the guys know, hey, remember that water leak we were all complaining about going to a bunch of times? Well, that poor old lady, she didn't have a lot of money, but she showed up the next day with her church people. They gave us a cake and, they thanked us. So I always tell everybody, like, you're getting called because somebody's having a bad day. Don't make their day worse. But we're human. And after so many calls and so many runs and you're just tired and exhausted, like you're going to get in these busy places, who's the senior person or who's the fire company that can get those guys to the end of the race, can push them over the hump and say, hey, this is what we signed up for. This is our job. It may not be the glamorous part of the job, but we're going to do the best we can for it. And that's because we owe these citizens, every ounce that we can give them, because that's what we signed up for. So surround yourself with that person. Don't surround yourself with the person that maybe is the loudest person or who breaks the chops the most. A lot of times those people are intertwined, anyway. A good senior guy is the guy that can give it, take it, and all that other good stuff. But really find out, like, it might not necessarily be the loudest person in your firehouse, but who's the one that really cares the most and wants to do the right thing by the people. Surround yourself with that type of individual, and you'll have a blessed career. That would be my advice. And realize that 20 years, 25 years, even 30 years is going to go by really, really quick. And you don't have to become, the chief of the department to have a great career. At the end of the day, to have a great career, you need to have the respect of the people that you came up with. To me, it didn't matter what rank I attained. It's, can I still go out and maybe have a beer at McSorley's and reminisce about the good old days with somebody I worked with, and maybe a couple of other people that came in because they heard you were in town and now they want to show up because, hey, Pete's coming in, we're going to have a couple of beers with him to talk about the good old days. That, to me, is how you know you had a successful career, when you get those people that still want to be around you after you're gone, and it goes by really, really quick. And the other advice I'll give you is, in my career, I saw a lot of people who didn't make it to 20 or ended their career with serious illness or serious injury. And I would say it is eventually, every career is eventually going to come to an end. So what I wish I could follow my own advice, but I didn't. But you kind of learn it now in retirement. What are you going to gear yourself up to when the fire department ends? Because when it ends, you're going to have to fill that void with something, and you don't want to fill it with drugs and alcohol. So are you going to fill it with maybe more family activity? Are you going to open up like a business or be involved in a business? I kind of went both directions on that. And, out, like, again, one of the senior guys I always respect, told me that, when you retire, they don't pay you anymore to break, windows and put, wet stuff on the red stuff. So try to figure out if the job has to end, especially if it has to end due to an injury or an illness. Do you have something in your pocket that you can pull out, like an education? Like, I was big on education. Like, I'm sure you realize, like, I went back and I got my PhD, Mike, and, when I retired, that was a goal. I had a goal that I wanted to finish up and get a PhD because I felt education was a way to fill the gap with not being on the fire service anymore. And it opened up new doors for me. It got me in some consulting gigs, and people will listen to me because they say PhD. I mean, the title doesn't mean anything to me. It's the type of person you are. But try to figure out what you're going to do when the fire department career comes to an end. And I knew plenty of people that went back and became nurses after the fact, or went into other industries after the fact, or were able to teach, even being a substitute teacher. I mean, who's a better substitute teacher than but a retired NYPD or FDNY person, right? Yeah. I mean, heck, if you can survive NYPD and you can survive FDNY, you'd probably be a pretty good substitute or, pretty good public school teacher. Think of all the good things you can do with that. And, so I would say try to figure out, like, you don't want to think about your career ending, but I can tell you right now, good friends of mine that, that have ended because of injury and illness, they were lost to the point where it was scary, where you're worrying about them because something that they wanted their entire life has now just abruptly ended. And how do you fill that void? So, and the other part to being, like, I learned this from the NYPD part of my career when I transferred it over. You don't want to just surround yourself, in my opinion, by, say, like, firefighters or police officers, because you just always think fire and police, whatever job you're on, right? Or EMS for that example, So if you surround yourself with some other people and some other industries, if you, I don't care if it's volunteering at the church or substitute teaching every now and then, you realize that you have value when the uniform days end, and you realize that you have value that you can transfer to other people and other things, So that would be my advice too. Like, go to school, especially now. I know the fire department, always had a good relationship with John Jay College, as does NYPD and everything. So you can go. I think you can still go to the school and take like 2 classes for free every semester. I know the fire department still has that in place, and I'm pretty sure the NYPD does. So, I mean, you can go there and take 2 classes a semester and get a degree. If you want to get a degree in something that is maybe a little different from criminal justice or fire science, get a degree in, like, protection management, or go to nursing school, or do something that, if, God forbid, your career has to end abruptly, maybe not on your terms, or you make a life decision where, hey, I'm proud of what I did, but now it's time to go, and I want to just be at home with my family. But at least if you have something in your Rolodex that you can now bring out, it makes retirement that much rewarding and that much easier to accept. So you hate to look at the end game when you first start, but it's going to be here sooner than you realize. So my advice would be, in your Reader's Digest version of it, would be surround yourself with good senior people, or good people for that matter. Come up with them, learn from them, you pass it on to the next generation of firefighters, and also have something in your Rolodex that, if it ends or when it ends, either your terms or, due to injury or illness, you have something that you can go to and still feel a value. Because being a retiree now, there is a lot of retirees out there that are lost. And I mean both NYPD, FDNY EMS. There's a lot of people out there that have done the first responder, career and everything. And they don't fare too very well in retirement. And it's something that we don't think about when we first get on. Hey, this is great, but when it ends, what else is left for me, And we do. Like, retirees from the fire and from police, they have a lot to offer. They don't realize how much they have to offer to both the rest of society society or to go out and get another job. But you may have to realign yourself with some education and a skill set. You're always going to go back to your NYPD and FDNY, trade, because you could still use that and use that in other purposes, So think about the end game, and while you're there, definitely surround yourself with the right people. That would be the best advice. And laugh. The big thing is laugh. Enjoy the job, everything that it can give you. There's a lot to do on the job. It's just not, getting and working in the Bronx and going to vacant building fire after vacant building fire. There's so much to the job now. So many different avenues to go. So enjoy the job, laugh, figure out what you want to do with it, learn from the best people you can, and have an end game over what is it going to mean for me,
All right. Well, that ends what's been a great podcast. We were able to work through the tech problems. Peter, I want to thank you for coming on. Like I said, I'll bring you back and we'll cover what we didn't cover. So I'll try to work that into my schedule and your schedule and as we get into 2022. So stick around. We'll say our goodbyes off the air. But by the way, before I get to my parting shots, do you have any shout outs or you want to give to anything before we go?
Yeah, here's the thing going up there. I know the Alsassa Fund, which is a fund for the Alsassa Fund, if you're aware of it, Mike, I'm sure you are, is that that was a fund that was set up for, firefighters at their career because of a non-line of duty injury, right? Motorcycle accident, something like that. And that's even more traumatizing for a member of service because now they're getting off the job and they're being retired and it's not even, let's say at a major blaze and they're like, oh, at least I went out the door on a high note kind of thing. No, this is someone that's, getting off the job because of a non-say line of duty injury, and it's called the Alsassa Fund. And, with 9/11, all the good things charity-wise that came out of it, the Alsassa Fund has really kind of gotten to free. So you can get it out to your readers that the Alsassa Fund is a good fund. 100% of those proceeds go to who have ended roughly on a 9-line of duty, scale. It helps them either go back to school, get re-educated, find another job, maybe get over, debilitating medical bills that aren't covered because it's a non-line of duty injury. So I would say the Alsassa Fund needs help. They need to get that money back up because, people are very generous, right? And especially like everybody looks at New Yorkers like, we're abrupt and, just all about business. If you look back to the days, after 9/11, some of the most generous people in the world contributed to, different 9/11 charities, which did a lot of good for a lot of people. And the Alsassa Fund kind of just because it didn't have that, press or whatever, kind of went by the wayside. And it's really a good charity to be involved with, and it does a lot of good for a lot of people that were willing to sacrifice everything, but now are being forced off the job due to a non-line of duty injury, and that money helps them in a lot of ways, either through cost of medical stuff that isn't covered because it's a non-line of duty, or helps them get re-educated so that they can go on and still live a productive life in society, maybe not as a firefighter anymore, but it gives them a different course of direction. And it also helps with counseling and everything like that. So that's a good thing to get involved in. That's kind of gone by the wayside. I hate to put it like that, but it's kind of been forgotten. And I know some people that have utilized it, and it helps save their lives and change their lives for the better. So that's a good, it's called the Alsassa Fund. And I'm sure you can find a link or something to give it to the readers and subscribe to tonight, but it's a really good charity that helps a lot of good people.
I will. Thank you very much, Peter. And I appreciate everybody sticking around for what was an unusual show. And like I said, in the technical difficulties, but nonetheless, still a good show. This has been another episode of the Mike to New Haven podcast, Volume 8 of the Best of the Bravest, featuring retired FDNY firefighter Peter Blaich. Join me again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Tales from the Boom Room. profiles of the NYPD's bomb squad, volume 16, with retired NYPD bomb squad detective Richie Teamsma. So stick around for that. And on behalf of Peter Blaich, I'm Mike Colón. We will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.